Am I the antagonist for asking my partner to get up with the baby once overnight while his son is with us? My partner and I recently had a new baby who is now 2 months old. This week I returned to work while my partner is still on paternity leave for a few more months. We decided to stagger our leave so that our baby wouldn't have to go to daycare just yet. During my leave, I was responsible for taking care of the baby overnight. My partner would take over for a few hours in the morning so that I could get some extra rest before taking care of the baby all day. There was a brief period when our leaves overlapped and we took turns taking care of the baby overnight. Now that I'm back at work, my partner has been looking after our son during the day. However, since I work from home, I still help out during the day when my workload gets heavier. I'm mainly in charge of taking care of the baby in the afternoons and evenings. My partner thinks I should be responsible for all care until the baby's last feeding around midnight. I'm okay with this arrangement because it allows him to get a longer stretch of sleep. However, I believe that in return, he should take care of the baby when he wakes up around 3/4 a.m. and sometimes around 5-6 a.m. This way, he can rest while the baby sleeps during the day or when I'm helping out with work. Now here's my question. My stepson, who is 6 years old, stays with us every other week. He and my partner have a very close bond, and he only wants his dad to interact with him. Being a typical 6-year-old, he constantly demands attention and assistance from his dad from morning till bedtime. My partner has explicitly asked me to take on more of a fun aunt role rather than a mom role with his son, so this is what he has requested. However, his responsibility to help with our infant doesn't change when his son is here. Last night, I suggested that we trade shifts, with him feeding the baby around midnight and me taking care of the rest of the night. He was confused by this, as he assumed I would be handling all the night feeds since it was the weekend and his son would be staying with us, implying that he wouldn't be able to get any sleep during the day because his son won't be at school, and he expected to have a full night's sleep. Am I in the wrong for asking him to get up with the baby at 4 a.m. since he refused to feed him at 11 p.m. midnight? In the end, I ended up getting up at 4:30 a.m. to feed the baby again, while my partner conveniently moved downstairs where he couldn't hear the baby. It seems like you and your partner have been working together fairly well in terms of sharing the responsibilities of caring for your infant up until this point. However, it is unfair for your partner to expect you to handle all the nighttime care and refuse to help with the baby at 4 a.m., especially since you have been working during the day. It's important that both partners in a parenting dynamic support each other and share responsibilities, regardless of whether or not your stepson is present. It is not unreasonable to expect your partner to take turns helping out with the baby during the night, even on weekends. Communication and compromise are key in finding a balance that works for both of you. Am I the antagonist for losing my temper with both my mom and my sister and saying I wish I could shut both of them up? I am currently really angry, but I also acknowledge that I may have reacted poorly towards both my mom and my sister. My sister and I have different fathers. My mom was in a relationship with my sister's dad, but she cheated on him and I am the result of that affair. Although he ended their relationship, he has remained involved in my sister's life. On the other hand, I never met or knew my biological father, as he wanted nothing to do with me. My mom wanted my sister's dad to act as a father figure for me. She would get annoyed when he bought things for my sister and not for me. While I didn't really mind, my mom did. It upset her when he would take my sister out to places like amusement parks, paintball, or the fair, and he would refuse to take me even if my mom offered to pay. She would suggest in front of me that he should take me too, but he always rejected the idea and rudely told her off. Over the years, this situation became increasingly frustrating, as my mom would constantly complain about it and act as if I should be upset with her ex for not doing anything for me. She would get angry on my behalf and expect me to react a certain way to his rejection. My sister became jealous when she found out that our grandparents paid special attention to me while she was with her dad because they knew I didn't have anyone else. She only knew this because my mom would mention it. However, my sister would get angry with me and accuse me of trying to exclude her from our grandparents' lives, as if I were their only grandchild or somehow more important to them. She would say hurtful things like, "It's no wonder my dad didn't want anything to do with me, and that children from affairs don't deserve to be spoiled by anyone." These issues have only escalated over the years, and now she despises me and views me as a disgusting little affair baby. A few days ago, both my mom and my sister brought up these same issues to me repeatedly throughout the day. My mom insulted my sister's dad and told me to let him know what a terrible person he is. My sister criticized me over our grandparents and accused me of being selfish. I reached my breaking point and lost my temper with both of them. I told my mom that I couldn't care less, and that I held more resentment towards her for lying about me wanting her ex to be my dad. I explained that she made me feel worse about not having a father than her ex ever did. I also told my sister that I was tired of her blaming me for my relationship with our grandparents. I reminded her that they loved her too, and that they didn't treat me better, but rather tried to compensate for my lack of family support. Lastly, I confronted her about throwing my status as an affair child in my face and how hurtful that was. Now both my mom and my sister are furious with me. They claimed that I directed my anger at the wrong person and treated my sister unfairly. Am I the asshole? It seems like you have been dealing with a lot of unfair treatment and emotional turmoil, and it is natural for you to feel angry and frustrated. Your mother should not have put pressure on you to feel a certain way about her ex and should not have complained about him in your presence. It was also unfair for your sister to blame you for the attention you received from your grandparents. You reached a boiling point and expressed your feelings, which is understandable given the circumstances. It is important to communicate your emotions as long as it is done respectfully. It may be helpful to have a calm and honest conversation with both your mother and sister to address these long-standing issues and find a way to move forward from this situation. Am I the antagonist for not refunding the buyers of broken fridge? So I have always had a painfully straight moral compass, giving in if there was even the slightest chance I was at fault. I don't see why I should refund it, but the thought of leaving someone feeling scammed has me torn in two. So I recently lost my job, and because of this, I need to move across the country to live with family until I get back on my feet. I can't afford storage or have space for storage at my family's place, and even if I did, the cost to move things is unbelievably high. This meant I needed to sell all my large items: fridge, washing machine, TV, couch, etc. I marked down the prices ridiculously, selling my fridge for $75 and washing machine for $60, considering they were secondhand and the emergency of the situation. The response was incredible, and after several offers, I agreed with one offering me $150 for both. But they wanted to pick up that day. I hesitantly agreed, knowing I would lose some frozen foods, and waited. They came late afternoon and I ended up giving them an old laptop for free, lost charger so couldn't test it and didn't know if it even worked anymore. When they inquired about an old phone they saw, I refused, saying that we would have to test it first before I can sell it. I have been scammed before, and by no means would I confidently sell something without knowing it worked. I had plugged the fridge out and cleaned it as well with the washing machine an hour prior, and when they arrived, we did plug both in to test. Note, she agreed the top part was cool. I asked several times if she was happy. She agreed, loaded, and then proceeded to ask if she could rather pay $130 since the drive was much longer than she expected. I was a tiny bit annoyed since others also offered $150, but held the first-come first-serve notion, and she left with a free laptop too. Sure, it might not work, but I mean really? Agreeing since the trouble of unloading, etc. seemed too much, and already running late on another engagement, she left. A week later, she contacts me, telling me the top isn't cooling. I told her to check the dial, make sure it's set on cold, and wait a few days. Now it still isn't working apparently. The bottom freezer is fine and the fridge light works but won't cool. I told her it was working perfectly here, and I don't see why I should take responsibility if their unloading or drive might have damaged it. Am I the asshole? Am I the antagonist? And should I just ignore it or refund her, with the probability that she probably will ask to pay for fuel or have to pick up, or maybe even keep it? Given the context and the urgency of your situation, it is understandable that you needed to sell your appliances quickly and at a lower price. Selling them as is also carries a level of risk, especially when it comes to electronic devices. You did your due diligence by plugging in the fridge and washing machine for the buyer to confirm they were in working condition. Additionally, you asked multiple times if she was satisfied before she agreed to purchase. It is unfortunate that the top part of the fridge is not cooling for the buyer, but you are not responsible for any damage that may have occurred during the transportation or unloading process. It is also possible that the issue with the fridge was not apparent during your testing because problems can arise after moving appliances. You have already done your part by providing the buyer with an opportunity to test the appliances and confirming their functionality. The buyer agreed to make the purchase, and it is reasonable to assume some level of responsibility for testing the appliances and inspecting them thoroughly. Refunding her would be an act of goodwill, but it is not necessary given the circumstances. If she insists on a refund, it would be reasonable to ask her to cover any costs associated with returning the appliances. Ultimately, it is up to you to decide whether you want to refund her or not. Am I the antagonist for not taking my son to visit my in-laws in nearly a year? My husband and I, both in our 30s, have a 20-month-old son. We waited a long time for him, as did our respective sets of grandparents, aunts, uncles, and so on. He is the first grandchild and nephew on both sides of the family. My mother-in-law has always made passive-aggressive comments, backhanded compliments, and sly remarks. However, since we announced our pregnancy, her behavior has escalated. Despite my mother, M, father, F, and sister-in-law being extremely excited about the baby, my mother-in-law started getting overly excited and bought a lot of equipment for their house when he arrived. We specifically told her not to, as we mentioned that we wouldn't be able to afford to visit too often due to my maternity pay being inadequate. We also made it clear that when we did visit, we would bring everything we needed. Their house is 90 miles away, which is a 1.5-hour journey on a good day. Fast forward. While I was on maternity leave, we visited them a few times, and they came up a few times initially after my son was born, as well as on special occasions like his birthday. When I returned to work, I reduced my hours so I could take care of my son since we can't afford daycare. My husband works from Tuesday to Saturday, with long hours and early starts, while I work Monday to Friday. Therefore, Sundays are the only days we can see each other and visit family or do anything together. However, this year they informed us that my father-in-law is no longer comfortable driving in the dark due to a bad accident he had a few years ago. It is important to note that both my sister-in-law and mother-in-law are capable of driving. They also mentioned that they would not be able to visit us as often because they couldn't afford a hotel to stay overnight. Despite my lower income and limited free time, they still expect us to visit them. Because we haven't, they have been ignoring us for the past few months. No messages, phone calls, or even likes on social media. They are purposefully excluding us. They rely on me posting updates about our lives on social media since my husband isn't active on those platforms. It's worth mentioning that they have traveled abroad twice for at least a week each time and have been on 2-week-long staycations this year. So they can afford to visit us, but our son is not a priority to them. I want to clarify that my husband is free to take our son to visit them anytime. This responsibility is shared. The question here is whether we are the ones in the wrong. My husband has also had enough of their behavior, and although I have left it to him to handle, he is clearly hurt by their lack of prioritization and hasn't communicated with them since they haven't made an effort with us. It sounds like your in-laws are being unreasonable and placing unrealistic expectations on you and your husband to visit them despite the difficulties and limitations you are facing. It is unfair for them to freeze you out and withhold communication because you are unable to meet their demands. Additionally, the fact that they have been able to afford vacations and trips while claiming they cannot afford to visit you shows that they are prioritizing their own desires over spending time with their grandchild. This can be hurtful and understandably upsetting. Your husband has every right to be hurt and frustrated by their actions. It might be helpful for both of you to have a conversation with them, expressing your feelings and discussing the importance of compromise and understanding. Ultimately, it is up to you and your husband to decide how to navigate this situation, but you are not the AH for wanting your in-laws to show more consideration and flexibility. Am I the antagonist for offending my classmate's mom by implying that she's sharing misinformation? I am a 17-year-old female and I serve as the president of our class. Disinformation is widespread in our country, and elderly individuals are often the ones who fall for false information due to their lack of fact-checking. However, I personally have trust issues and always ensure that the information I acquire comes from reliable sources. An incident occurred last month just as our midterms exams were approaching. The problem started when it was announced that there would be a transport strike on the same days as our exams, causing confusion among many students regarding whether the exams would be postponed. A parent, who is a woman in her 40s, sent a class suspension announcement to the parents' group chat. The message included places that supposedly announced the class suspensions, including our location. At first glance, it appeared legitimate because it contained a link. However, when I read the article from the provided link, there was no mention of class suspensions. The issue was that this message was sent in a format where anyone could type and forward anything. Consequently, I took it upon myself to research and verify the information by checking official news sources. I found one article with a similar headline, but our location was not included. Later that day, a classmate of mine asked me in our own group chat if the exams were postponed or not. He forwarded the announcement that had been sent by the parent and said, "I saw this in the parents' group chat." My response to him was, "Isn't that fake news?" Vince jokingly remarked, "Mother of baby strikes again." The truth was, it was indeed baby's mother who had sent the fake announcement. Vince said again because his mother was notorious for sending these types of false announcements. On certain occasions, she even contacted the school to request class suspensions, causing considerable confusion. Baby defended his mother, stating that she always had sources. Due to this, I explained why I believed it was fake and even showed them the original article. This situation was significant to me because, as the class president, I felt a responsibility to address it. The outcome would affect a large portion of our grades since it concerned our midterms. Following that, more classmates of mine made jokes such as we should report her account, remove her from the group chat, or accounts of older people should be separate from ours, among others. I recognized these as jokes and found them to be silly and amusing. A week later, when I woke up and opened my phone, I was greeted by a lengthy message. It turned out to be baby's mother using his account. She wrote a detailed message expressing how hurt she felt after reading our previous messages, particularly mine and Vince's. According to her, she is a professional who would never spread fake news. She asserted that she is very involved and hands-on, so she couldn't understand why we would report her account. In essence, she took the jokes literally and seriously. While I understood that the jokes might have offended her, I didn't comprehend why I was in the wrong. I merely explained my point of view. Nonetheless, I apologized to her on behalf of our class and clarified that it was never my intention to personally attack her. So am I the one at fault for offending her because I proved that she sent misinformation? You are not the asshole for offending her because you proved that she sent misinformation. As the class president, it is your responsibility to ensure that accurate information is being shared with your classmates, especially regarding important matters like exams. You made an effort to research and fact-check the information before providing an explanation. It is not your fault that she took the joke seriously or felt personally attacked. You apologized to her on behalf of the class, showing that you did not intend to harm her feelings. It is important to prioritize the dissemination of accurate information and address any misinformation accordingly. Am I the antagonist for wanting to use my electric heater? I am a university student living with 4 other people in a house. Despite having the smallest room, I pay the same rent due to having a small study upstairs. This study is located next to one of my flatmates' rooms, whom I will call Richard. As the weather has started getting cold, I turned on the heating last week. Richard suggested that we should all have a discussion about when the heating should be on since we are all responsible for the bills. I agreed with his suggestion, but we never got around to having that conversation. However, I decided not to use the central heating since then. Instead, I told Richard that if it was too early to use the central heating, I could simply use a small electric heater temporarily if I felt cold. He seemed fine with that. Yesterday, while studying in the study, I felt quite cold. Please note that I get cold easily, even when wearing layers. So I turned on my heater, which is a fan heater that produces some noise. After approximately 5 minutes, Richard asked me to switch it off because it was too loud. Although I personally could not hear any disruptive noise, I agreed to turn it off and said I would switch it back on after he left for a party in an hour. At this point, I found Richard to be excessively picky, especially since he often plays his music loudly and has many people over without any complaints from me. However, I shrugged it off and focused on my assignment as I was getting frustrated. This evening, I went back to the study and turned on the heater again. Richard called me and requested that I turn it off. I complied, but mentioned that if I couldn't use my small electric heater, I would like to have the central heating on instead. He accused me of being unnecessary and suggested that I go to my other room, which lacks a workspace, and use my heater there if I really wanted to. I expressed that I didn't want to create difficulties, but since I am paying the same rent for the study, I believe I should be able to use it. I contended that he was being unreasonable, considering he didn't want the central heating on and disliked me using my heater. In response, he called me difficult, told me to FCA off and hung up. He then continued the argument on the group chat with the other flatmates mostly staying neutral. Additionally, I brought up the fact that I never complain when he plays loud music, to which he responded that he can do whatever he wants in his room. I found this hypocritical and confronted him about it, but he emphasized that it was different because I have 2 rooms. However, I struggle to see how that changes anything. Eventually, we all reached a consensus as a flat to turn on the central heating for 2 hours in the evening before bed. Furthermore, we agreed that we could use personal heating devices during the rest of the day as long as it wasn't excessive, since we all contribute to the electricity bill. I offered to try using a different heater that may not make as much noise if the previous one bothered him so much. However, he didn't respond to that suggestion. Personally, I am extremely frustrated. I had hoped to maintain good relations with my flatmates, and I have made an effort to be friendly and reasonable, but I refuse to be taken advantage of in the end. You are not being unreasonable in wanting to use the study that you are paying equal rent for. It's understandable that you want to have a comfortable and productive space to work in. Richard's double standard of being able to play loud music in his room, but not allowing you to use a small electric heater seems unfair. Furthermore, he initially agreed to you using the heater in the study but then changed his mind and told you to go to the other room without workspace. The compromise that was reached regarding the central heating and personal heating devices seems fair, and you even offered to try using a different heater to accommodate Richard's concerns. It's unfortunate that he didn't respond to that suggestion. Overall, you have tried to be reasonable and find a solution that works for everyone. It seems like Richard may be the one being difficult in this situation. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.